Hi, this is Nando from CNC Commentaries, and on this episode of CNC Movie Breakdowns, we're going to be talking about Jingle All the Way. Happy holidays, everybody, from CNC Commentaries. And I am, of course, joined by my co-host, Chase.
Get down if you want to live.
Yup.
We're talking about Arnold.
My favorite actor. Can't go wrong with Arnold.
He is a man of many talents. Actor, bodybuilder, governor. The list of accolades is unlike anyone else.
Arnold is certainly a man of many talents.
Some would say that.
But today we're going to be looking at Jingle All the Way, a Christmas classic. And
for some people more than others, surprisingly.
Yeah. Let's go into our, first impressions of this movie. I've maybe seen this movie once or twice before. It really wasn't on my list of Christmas classics. But revisiting this movie has been a really good experience. I think people need to give this movie a rewatch. People need to look back on this movie. They'll find it's a lot better than they thought it was. What about you?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you on that. Like, I've only seen this I think one other time before this episode, but I'm right there with you. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I was looking at this, and you see like this gets such like poor response on Rotten Tomatoes, whether you'd like to gauge Rotten Tomatoes on your opinions or not, but I think people don't realize just how much fun this is, and I think there's actually this movie was made at a time it could only be in that time. You couldn't make this today, and I think we'll get into that later, but everyone is giving it their all, and it's just very memorable, and Arnold has so many great lines, and I think it's a joy to watch around the holiday season. I'm gonna rewatch this more for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure. This has become one of my favorite Christmas movies nowadays. This movie's instant classic. But yeah.
And I was a little more surprised than you, because I think like you said, Arnold is one of your favorites, and you have that, that's gonna always bump it higher for you.
Yeah.
But I was like right on that same level with you. Like, I never felt myself in a dull spot. It always felt like it was moving forward nicely. There's a lot of great, just humorous moments, and it's not too long, and I say we can get into it,
Yeah, but let's get into a synopsis first.
Oh, synopsis. Would you like me?
Oh, please, go ahead. What a kind offer.
Oh, why, thank you. Well, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He plays Howard Langston, and it's the holiday season, of course, and his son Jamie, played by Jake Lloyd himself, young Anakin.
Yeah, this is before the Phantom Menace.
This is pre-Star Wars Jake Lloyd. He wants this new, this hot new toy, the Turbo Man doll, and Howard's talking to his wife, and she's like, make sure you got him that doll, right? And he's like, oh yeah, of course, I got it for him, but he didn't, and so he has to go on this big journey to get the doll, and he comes across this mailman played by Sinbad, who is also looking for one of the Turbo Mans, and it just, it leads to stuff that occurs, and things get tested, and he learns the true meaning of Christmas.
Yeah, Arnold gets into some hijinks into this movie. He learns the value of family, the value of Christmas.
It's not a Christmas movie unless you learn the value of Christmas.
That is true. It's in the unwritten rules of Christmas movies.
Yeah. I guess without further ado, let's jump into this Turbo Man packed film.
All right. So this movie opens, and the first thing that we see is Arnold being not the best father and neglecting his family. Yeah. So Arnold.
Well, we also see this. We open in like an actual Turbo Man show,
Oh yeah, the Turbo Man show.
which it looks like a combination of like
Power
just like
Rangers.
yeah, Power Rangers and like
Iron Man.
in a sense, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's just like this cheesy, like almost '80s type superhero feel
Yeah.
of
It's
like
like old
the
Power Rangers.
yeah, it basically is, and I think like there's a lot of it's kind of paralleling that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Turbo Man's. Turbo Man's
I'm
a
surprised
parody.
how we haven't had a actual Turbo Man film yet. Like we need a crossover with we need like a Turbo Man film in like the same vein of a Last Action Hero of
Oh.
like Turbo Man coming out of the screen.
Yeah.
I think that could be done well.
For sure. For sure. And yeah, Turbo Man's just a parody of superhero stuff. And this movie was made in 1996. Yeah, this is before things like the MCU.
I mean, but we've already had that like first wave of like the Batman stuff and the Superman, you know.
Yeah. So yeah, Turbo Man is clearly a parody of these superhero things, and Turbo Man has all these cool things. Like he's got a jetpack, he's got a boomerang, he's got little like turbo disc that he can shoot out of his wrists. And
Yeah, and like, looking back on it, all of that is set up pretty well for to be used later in the film.
yeah, and um, so after that little Turbo Man show intro, we get introduced to Arnold. He plays a guy named Howard, and Howard's kind of like he's just he's a workaholic basically. He kind of neglects his family, and Jamie. He has a karate tournament thing. He's like advancing a belt, I think. And
Yeah.
Arnold is he's working, but then like an assistant comes in, and she's like, "Oh, it's in 20 minutes," and so eventually he rushes, and then he's saying to himself, "I'm gonna make it." Then he gets into his car, he hits traffic, then he tries to bypass traffic, and he gets pulled over. And one of my favorite like parts in this movie is the interactions with the cop, because it comes in later, like later in the movie too. But
Yeah, it's a running gag throughout with the different cops and
yeah, so this
Arnold's interactions with them.
Arnold is like, "Oh, please, I'm in a hurry," and then this cop makes him do like all these tests. Like he makes him walk the line to see if he's drunk. He makes him recite the ABCs, and he just makes Arnold, later, and Arnold eventually doesn't make it to. He just doesn't make it to Jamie's little karate thing. And
I mean, going into this that there's gonna be like this kind of setup to cause like a sense of tension between the parent and the kid, and what are they gonna do to make that up? And so that's gonna be the driving force to set us off. Oh, you don't love me, but okay, what do you want, son? I want the Turbo Man action doll.
yeah, and so Arnold he's talking to his wife, and his wife is like, "Oh, you remember to get him that Turbo Man doll, right?" And he lies to his wife. He's like, "Oh yeah, I totally got it." But then he ends up not getting he did not get the Turbo Man doll. And so that's the plot of this movie. His journey to get this Turbo Man doll, even though they're like selling out like crazy.
Yeah. And during this time, we're also introduced to to Howard's neighbor Ted, played by the great Phil Hartman. Almost said Philip Seymour Hoffman, but yeah, the late great Phil Hartman is in this, and he plays their neighbor Ted, and he also was at the karate practice, and was there, kind of comforting Howard's wife, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sure he wanted to be here, but oh, don't worry, Howard, I recorded it all for you, so you can watch it."
Yeah.
And during this interaction, he tells him that he got his son a Turbo Man doll, and it's sitting cozy underneath the tree.
Yeah. Ted in this movie, it's like a running joke that he's like screwing everyone's wife.
Yeah, he's literally just spewing off innuendos left, right, and center.
Yeah, that's a thing about this movie. This movie can be really enjoyed by kids and adults.
I honestly think it's more centered towards adults.
Yeah, there are definitely some
100% is
more adult jokes and themes here. Like Ted, if you put like a 10-year-old in front and watching this movie, they wouldn't get Ted's, like, what Ted is, the Ted joke.
Well, not only that, but this whole movie is just like a rapid satire on like commercialism and just the whole consumer industry around the holidays. Kids aren't gonna get that.
Yeah, it's really...
and there's a joke later on. It's one of my favorite jokes in the movie. We can jump forward to this, I guess, but we have Sinbad. He plays a mailman, and there's this part where, so there's a setup where he has a package, and he's like, "Oh, don't, there's a I wouldn't mess with me, man. There's a bomb in here." But then later we find out there's not a bomb. But then that same setup is used again, and there's an actual bomb. And he's like, "Well, it is the U.S. mail system."
Yeah, he's like, "We got some sick people."
And I'm just like, they really went there. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, Arnold just goes around town, going through every toy store, but he's kind of getting laughed at the entire time. That's when he runs into Mailman Myron. He's played by Sinbad, and Sinbad is also trying to find the same thing Arnold is, because he also wants to get his kid a Turbo Man doll, so that way he doesn't ruin Christmas.
I mean, it's that hot new toy, that everyone wants. And like this kind of thing, like you don't really see this now. Like obviously now this movie would not happen because you got online shopping and whatnot.
Yeah.
But this came out at the perfect point you could do this. You have the freaking Cabbage Patches, Tickle Me Elmo dolls, whatever. And so it's playing on that.
Yeah, this movie definitely nailed the time of coming out. Like this movie was perfect for 1996. There's all these, as you said, there's all these hot new like things like the Tickle Me Elmo dolls, but this is before online shopping. So it all lines up pretty nicely. And Sinbad wants to kind of team up with Arnold, but Arnold is like, no. And part of this movie is just them fighting each other, trying to get a Turbo Man doll. Like there's this part where they find out that a toy store is getting a late shipment of Turbo Man dolls, and so they kind of race there. Arnold knocks over a police motorcycle, and he gets in trouble with the cops again. And when him and Sinbad eventually, enter the toy store, they got this late shipment. There's that iconic scene where Arnold's running around a mall trying to get like this ball, so that way he can get a Turbo Man doll.
That is very impressive how that ball was able to bounce for that long.
Yeah, this ball clearly like was extra bouncy or something.
World's bounciest ball.
Yeah, it leads to one of the best jokes in the movie where Arnold is like trying to take the ball away from this kid in a ball pit, and he gets called a pervert by all the moms, and he gets beaten by purses.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I think there's an interesting thing in this movie of how they kind of balance him going from one thing to another, because I think it's it's a tough thing to make it go from like Arnold looking for this that isn't in stock in a store to trying to buy it off someone, you can only do so many things like that. But then I love how they, there's the radio contest and just
Yeah.
various things that actually keep it going forward, and it actually makes sense in a way,
Yeah.
like in terms of the story
Once this movie
progressing.
gets going, it really gets going. Like, I really like how this movie doesn't waste your time. This movie is 1 hour and 35 minutes long. It's just as long as it needs to be. There's no extra padding
Yeah.
or anything.
I mean, and that's just what you want. Arnold in holiday action, and you it's going to be resolved at the end. You know he's going to get a doll somehow.
Yeah.
But that's not what you're really there for. You're there to see how it happens and the, dare I say, hijinks and characters and weird people he meets along the way and circumstances he has to go through.
Yeah. But Arnold and Sinbad, they're just looking for this doll, and eventually they hear like a radio contest that like whoever names all of Santa's reindeer gets a Turbo Man doll. Well, really, it's a ticket for a Turbo Man doll, but they don't hear that part.
Yeah.
And eventually, Sinbad and Arnold fight their way. They get to the radio station. They find out it's just a ticket, and Sinbad has that setup with the bomb, and these people just broke into like a radio station, so the police are after them. I can't believe.
And honestly, they should be arrested.
Yeah, they're like creating chaos all over the city. These guys are menaces to society.
I love the radio DJ played by Martin Mull. There's so many great people in this movie, like in just little bit parts, and it's nice to like watch back and just be like, oh look, there's that person who just shows up for 5 minutes.
Yeah, and throughout this kind of movie, we're kind of cutting to little Jamie and his mom, and we're just kind of cutting back and forth, and Jamie and his mom are going to this parade, and Turbo Man's gonna be at the parade, and so Jamie's all excited, and throughout this whole movie, Ted is hitting on Arnold's wife, Liz.
Yeah.
And you know from the beginning that he's been like screwing everyone's wife, so she's just next on the list.
Or at least it appears that way.
Yeah.
And the best part is that whenever Arnold will try and check in and call his wife, and Ted will pick up and be like, he's like, put down the cookie,
Oh
he's
yeah,
like,
you get that iconic
stop tasting
line.
my wife's recipes. He's like, oh yeah, he's just making all these innuendos, and Arnold's misinterpreting them as something else.
Yeah, you get that iconic line where he tells Ted, "Put that cookie down," and it's great. But then, more hijinks ensue. Is there anything else notable, or should we get to the parade?
we didn't. There are a few scenes we didn't talk about. There was the kind of, I don't know how you'd say it, but
the Santa cult.
The fake Santa operation.
Yeah, the Santa cult
leads to a sort of sting operation.
Yeah. When Arnold's like going around the mall, he meets this mall Santa, and his little.
Played by Jim Belushi, actually, which.
Yeah. And he takes Arnold to this little factory where there's like 500 men in Santa suits, all
which
work.
I don't don't get me wrong, Arnold is buff as hell, but I don't know why they were taking it on as one Santa at a time in that versus match.
Oh man, Santa's pretty hardcore.
I mean, there's that giant Santa that is there, but then. Hey, they're freaking just fighting with candy canes, and it's an all-out brawl. And then Arnold fakes being like an FBI informant. Yeah,
he fakes that he was like on stakeout, and he like yells at the guys like, "This is the single worst sting I've ever seen," and it's just great.
Which there are actual Turbo Man dolls there,
but
why and the only problem is that it's in It's in Spanish,
And
right?
it broke apart. Like, these are
Well,
very poorly constructed Turbo Man dolls.
I mean, I guess. Okay, I guess for me, I saw it as I thought they were just in a different language, which like maybe it was just like you flip a switch and
Yeah, it's
then
like the Buzz Lightyear.
yeah, like the Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story 3.
You just flip a switch and he turns back to English.
That's the crossover we need. Turbo Man and Toy Story.
That'd be pretty great. But yeah, so Arnold fights his way through the Santa organization.
The Santa tirade.
Yeah, he fights like 30 different Santas, fakes being a federal officer, and leaves.
Just another day for Howard.
Yeah, Howard the office worker. That's the first thing he thinks to do. All right. Then what else did we skip over? Should we just jump to the parade?
I mean, yeah, we talked about he eventually loses Myron for a bit, and he's off on his own. But then they meet back up at a diner, and then that's when they initially hear about the contest.
Yeah.
And I guess we can jump into that, this action-packed finale.
Yeah. So, Arnold's wife and, Jamie are getting tired of waiting for Arnold. And so, they just go to the parade and Ted drives them. Oh, wait, we skipped over. Arnold tried to break into Ted's house.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very important.
So Arnold is like, his car gets wrecked, and so, he has to take a taxi back home, and, his family is angry at him for, holding them up, and, eventually he just gets kind of desperate, and he remembers that Ted bought his kid a Turbo Man doll, and that's under the Christmas tree, so he tries to break into Ted's house and take the Turbo Man doll, but...
And then everything goes bad.
He sets a fire in Ted's house.
I mean, we forgot to mention earlier, it's not very important, but Ted had a reindeer.
Yeah, Ted had a reindeer.
Holidays,
who was pissed off.
And this reindeer's a little pissed off at Howard.
Yeah. And he gets into a fight with the reindeer in Ted's house.
I mean, how many movies can you say that you have seen Arnold Schwarzenegger punch a reindeer?
Yeah, the fight gets all like WWE. They're like smashing through walls.
Well, he literally does bare fists to Antler, and I'm like, I don't think that would go well.
I don't know, man. He is Arnold. He's quite the man.
No, I mean, he's Howard in this, but
he's Howard.
Oh yeah, that's another thing we don't even talk about. You expect me to think that Arnold Schwarzenegger and Rita Wilson make Jake Lloyd?
Yeah,
I'm not buying that.
I expected Jake Lloyd to look a little bit more Austrian. I won't lie to you.
I mean, that's the best part about Arnold Schwarzenegger comedies, is that just believing that
he just gets put
this isn't just some
places.
giant monstrous Austrian man, and this is just a regular business guy.
Yeah, he gets put in the weirdest places. But yeah, so Ted drives his family to the parade without Arnold. And so Arnold eventually, like, the cops catch up with him until he runs into, like, this building that he thinks is, like, abandoned. And they start, there's these guys in the building, they start putting him into a suit. And in one of the funniest jokes of the movie, this kind of, like, tech guy, he comes up to him and he's like, oh, you went through the instruction manual, right? Oh, don't worry about the last guy. He showed some, after his crash, don't worry, he showed some brain activity this morning.
Yeah, which, like, why wouldn't you just wait a little longer to, like, I know you're probably running behind in the show, but at least wait a little bit longer to see that this is the right guy.
Oh, wow. And it turns
Deus Ex Machina.
Turns out that they're dressing him up as Turbo Man because they mistake him for another guy, and he is gonna be Turbo Man in the parade. And I really like Turbo Man's sidekick. I don't remember the name of the character.
Booster?
Yeah, Booster.
Yeah,
everybody hates Booster.
He's played by the guy in the Booster.
He's like smoking.
Played by Curtis Armstrong. He's just like this freaking smoker, and he's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, start waving. And yeah, so Arnold is playing Turbo Man, and he's kind of like he's just waving around. He has the whole Turbo Man get up on. He's got the little boomerang. He's got a jetpack. When I was watching this, I wasn't exactly sure how far he was gonna go with this.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, eventually, the little announcers announced that Turbo Man's gonna pick one kid, and that one kid gets a special Turbo Man doll.
Also, I just want to say, you expect me to believe that this, like, the last person is the same exact build as this hulking man?
Oh man, Turbo Man's a big guy.
Guess so.
But yeah, so Arnold. He's looking for his son, but then Sinbad comes back, and during the intro, we get introduced to like Turbo Man's villain.
Yeah.
And it turns out that Myron or Sinbad steals a costume of Arnold's or Turbo Man's villain, and he kind of like he gets onto the little float on the parade, and he starts battling Turbo Man. And
I don't know how Myron was just able to get up onto that roof.
Yeah, how did he know?
Take out a guy.
How did Myron the mailman know that there was going to be a guy?
This was all premeditated. He was already planning on doing this.
He's just like a galaxy brain play. He knows everything that's going to happen before it happens.
Yeah, I want to see that. I want to see that side plot of just how Myron ended up there.
Yeah. But they get into a scrap, and everybody at the parade thinks that it's staged when it's not. But Jamie has like the special Turbo Man doll now, and Sinbad's looking to get it because he wants it for his son. And they go on quite the chase.
Yeah, there's another one of my favorite lines is Jamie's like climbing up this ladder, and then the wife Liz is like she's trying to go up and get him, and she sees like a security guard, and she's like, hey, I need to get up there, that's my son. And he's like, oh yeah, he's doing a real good job. And she's like, no, he's not part of the act. It's like, oh
yeah, like everybody thinks that this is just an act. But eventually Arnold has to use the jetpack on this Turbo Man costume, but this is a real jetpack.
Apparently.
Like, and of course, this movie was made in 1996. The special effects do not look good. They've not aged.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. The special effects are awful here.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible.
Even by 1996 standards, these special effects aren't good.
You're just getting close-ups of Arnold's face swirling around with city background.
You can see the obvious screen behind him. Like, it's just...
Like, we're not really getting into, like, there's not much to get into with, like, the terms of cinematic quality of this film, and I don't think you go to this for that. You go to this for a fun Christmas time, You're not, like, there's nothing special about the direction or whatnot. This is just a fun time.
Yeah.
But anyways, special effects are awful.
Yeah. But eventually, Sinbad and Jamie kind of get on this little thing, and they're about to fall down. But, Sinbad falls down. But Arnold manages to save his son before he falls. And the cops arrest Sinbad. But Jamie ends up giving the Turbo Man doll to Sinbad. Because
he's heartfelt.
Yeah, he said when asked why, he's like, "Oh, why do I need a doll? I have the real one right here." Yeah, and then it's revealed to Jamie that his dad was Turbo Man. Yeah, and it's revealed to his wife as well. And then they go home, and I love the way this movie ends.
Yeah, this ending is great.
Everybody's all happy, and then his wife is like, "Wow, you worked really hard on that Christmas present for your son. Now I wonder what you got me."
And then we get this nice zoom into Arnold's shocked, like, face.
And that's how the movie ends. And this movie ends on a good joke. I love it. But yeah, why don't we go into our final thoughts here and ratings?
I guess I'll start. I feel like, the setup and ending of this film are very predictable, but I feel like it's a fun ride along the way. You have Arnold doing fun Arnold stuff. Just everybody in this movie is having a fun time. It's not taking itself seriously, which is good. I think sometimes stuff like this tries to yeah, it tries to be heartfelt at the end in a way, but it's definitely not a serious film.
No, it's a good thing this movie doesn't take itself seriously.
Yeah. I think the best part of this movie is Phil Hartman as Ted. He's definitely my favorite character. Every time he's on screen, I was laughing.
He always makes some kind of innuendo. It's classic.
It's just Phil Hartman. He's so damn good, and
I imagine they didn't even give him a script. This is just Phil Hartman being Phil Hartman.
Yeah, this is probably there was probably some Phil Hartman improv in here. But it's honestly, if you haven't seen this in a while, just rewatch it. Check it out. It's a lot more fun than you think. And I honestly think, like I said, this is more geared towards adults. And obviously, we aren't adults, but we're not young kids. And this says a lot, like I said earlier, about, commercialism and just like, that whole... I feel like this really dives into what it means for adults during the Christmas season and kind of like that pressure of trying to get the right gift for your kid if you have kids, or just anyone in general get the right gift.
Yeah.
And yeah, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be the same thing for me. Like, give this movie a revisit. You'll have yourself a good time. I obviously think the best part of this movie is Arnold. I love Arnold and basically everything that he is. You just can't go wrong when you have Arnold. But yeah, I just like what this. Yeah, as you said, this movie is surprisingly more adult. Like, I feel like this is probably the adult Christmas classic, and I think it's an absolute tragedy that it's rated so low.
I mean, I don't know if I'd say it's the adult Christmas classic. I think It's a Wonderful Life might argue with that, but in a sense, it's definitely there. It's definitely, I think it gets a lot more hate than it deserves.
Yeah, like, just revisit the movie. You'll have fun.
Which you'd think it would be the opposite with more '90s nostalgia.
Yeah. But anyway, why don't we rate this movie?
Alright, I guess I'll start. This is I don't know exactly where to rate this, it's kind of tough for me in terms of, it's not the best technically in any respect, but I had a fun time. I can see myself honestly rewatching it every year around the holidays.
I know, I'm going to be rewatching this every year.
I think it's just a fun time. Like I said, I'd probably give it close to a 6.5, honestly. Maybe more. I just enjoy it. This might be in my top favorites for holiday films, honestly.
Yeah. But me, I'm gonna rate this movie higher. I'm gonna give this movie a solid 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10?
I liked this movie probably more than I should have. It's a classic in my head now. It's a classic. Like, I honestly can't really think of anything that I didn't like in this movie. Like, I loved every part of this movie.
And honestly, I'm probably closer to a 7, if I'm being honest with myself. There was just never a time where I found myself being like, ugh, this is a drudge to get through this part. There was a smile on my face throughout.
Yeah, that's for sure. But I think that wraps up our episode on Jingle All the Way.
Stay tuned for more stuff. I think we're probably going to take a little break over the holiday season, but we'll be back sometime in January. And we will let you guys know with what we are going to be watching. But I assure you it'll be something fun.
Yep, you guys have a good one. Bye.
Happy holidays.